Reflection. Discipline is quiet. It moves without applause and without permission. And it does not announce itself when you wake up before the sun. And it does not celebrate when you choose work over comfort. Reflection. And it simply asks one question every single day. And will you do what is required even when you feel nothing? And that choice, repeated daily, reshapes the way you think. Reflection. And it replaces emotional decisions with intentional actions. And you stop waiting to feel ready before you move. And you move because commitment told you to stand up. Reflection. And over time, that obedience to effort changes your posture. And discipline teaches you how to respect your own word. And when you say you will show up, you actually arrive. Reflection. And when you promise yourself progress, you honor it. And that self-trust becomes stronger than outside motivation. And people think confidence comes from winning big moments. Reflection. And real confidence is built in unseen repetitions. And it is built in early mornings and lonely nights. And discipline turns chaos into structure inside your mind. Reflection. And structure creates clarity when life feels overwhelming. And clarity allows you to move forward without panic. And discipline does not change you overnight. It changes you permanently. Reflection. And it starts by challenging your excuses and negotiating habits. And you realize how often comfort was running your schedule. And discipline interrupts that pattern with firm expectations. Flexion, and you begin to train your mind like a muscle. And some days it resists, some days it cooperates. And either way, the work still gets done. Reflection, and that consistency hardens your focus and softens your fear. And fear loses power when action becomes automatic. And automatic action builds momentum without emotional drama. Reflection. And when pressure arrives, discipline becomes your anchor, and emotions rise, noise increases, opinions surround you. And discipline keeps you steady in the middle of it. Flexion, and you stop reacting and start responding with intention. And that calm strength separates leaders from spectators. And discipline gives you standards that do not bend. Flexion, and you no longer ask what is easy, and you ask what is necessary for growth. And growth demands repetition, patience, and sacrifice. And sacrifice becomes normal when purpose is clear. Reflection, and over time, discipline reshapes your identity quietly. And the mirror reflects someone more grounded and composed, and your walk changes because your mind is no longer scattered. Reflection, and your words carry weight because they come from action, and people notice the difference before you mention it. And they call it maturity, strength, or transformation. Flexion, and you know it was daily discipline doing its work, and it trained you to operate without applause or permission. And it made effort a habit rather than a struggle. Reflection. And that habit continues to shape who you are becoming. And discipline also teaches patience in a fast reward world. And you stop rushing outcomes and start trusting process. Reflection. And process demands faith when results are delayed. And discipline keeps you working without immediate validation. And it trains you to invest without instant returns. Reflection. And that patience separates professionals from dabblers. And dabblers quit when excitement fades. And discipline remains when excitement disappears. Reflection, and it understands growth is often silent and slow progress still moves you forward daily. And discipline requires honesty about where you truly are. Flexion, and it removes blame and places responsibility in your hands. And you stop pointing at circumstances and start adjusting behavior. And that ownership is uncomfortable but powerful. Reflection, and power grows when excuses lose influence, and discipline strips life down to controllable actions. And effort, focus, time, and consistency become priorities. Reflection, and you manage energy instead of chasing motivation. And motivation comes and goes without warning. And discipline stays available regardless of mood. Reflection, and through discipline you learn how to suffer intelligently. And not all pain is productive or meaningful. And discipline chooses pain that produces progress. Reflection, and it rejects shortcuts that weaken character. And character is built when standards are non-negotiable. And you begin to value long-term strength. And short-term pleasure loses its authority. Reflection, and discipline reframes struggle as training, and training prepares you for moments that matter. And those moments reveal who you practice becoming. Reflection, and discipline also changes how you handle success, and praise no longer distracts you from the work. And you appreciate wins without getting comfortable. Flexion, and discipline reminds you the standard never drops, and consistency becomes more important than celebration. And you keep showing up after applause fades. And that humility protects you from ego. Reflection, and ego weakens focus and invites mistakes. And discipline keeps focus narrow and intentional. And intentional focus sharpens every decision you make. Reflection, and eventually discipline becomes part of your natural rhythm. And what once felt heavy now feels familiar. And you no longer negotiate with laziness. and you recognize it and move anyway. Reflection and discipline has already decided for you, and the work feels honest and aligned, and your days reflect your values clearly, and clarity continues to replace confusion. Reflection and action continues even when conditions are imperfect, and the process continues shaping you day by day. Talent opens doors, but discipline decides whether you stay inside the room. Reflection, and many people are gifted, but few are consistent. And potential is common, execution is rare, and discipline is what shows up when excitement fades. Reflection, and it works when results are invisible and progress feels slow. And it does not ask if you are inspired today, and it asks if you are committed to becoming better. Flexion and commitment transforms raw ability into refined skill, and without discipline, talent stays undeveloped and fragile. And with discipline, potential begins to take direction and meaning. Reflection and discipline gives purpose to effort and structure to ambition. And it turns scattered energy into focused action. And instead of trying everything, you commit to one direction. Reflection, and that direction becomes clearer with daily practice. And discipline teaches you how to prioritize what matters. And you stop wasting time proving yourself to others. Reflection, and you start building something that speaks for you. And purpose grows when your actions match your values. And values become visible through repeated behavior. Flexion, and that behavior slowly defines who you are becoming. And discipline trains you to work without guarantees. And there are no promises of quick success. Reflection, and there is only effort placed into uncertain outcomes. And most people quit in this uncomfortable space. And discipline teaches you to remain steady there. Reflection, and you learn to trust the work instead of the clock. And progress becomes internal before it becomes visible. And that patience separates professionals from dreamers. Reflection, and dreamers wait for perfect conditions. And disciplined people create progress in imperfect situations. And discipline builds endurance when motivation disappears. Reflection, and motivation is emotional and unpredictable. And discipline is reliable and grounded. And when enthusiasm fades, discipline carries the load. Reflection, and it keeps you moving when feelings argue against effort. And this is where real growth happens quietly, and you develop strength without needing encouragement. Reflection, and that independence makes you harder to break, and external validation loses its control over you, and you begin to rely on your own standards. Flexion, and discipline also sharpens focus in a distracted world, and everything competes for your attention daily. And discipline teaches you to say no without guilt. Flexion, and it protects your time and your energy, and focus allows you to go deeper, not wider. And depth creates mastery and confidence. And confidence earned through discipline feels unshakable. Flexion, and you stop chasing approval and start chasing excellence. And excellence demands consistency, not perfection. And consistency becomes your daily language of progress. And through discipline, reflection, failure becomes a teacher, not a verdict. And mistakes no longer define your identity, and they become feedback for improvement. And discipline keeps you learning instead of quitting. Flexion, and you adjust, refine, and try again. And that resilience turns setbacks into stepping stones, and each attempt strengthens your understanding. And growth becomes a continuous process. Reflection, and you stop fearing failure and start respecting effort. And effort always pays something back eventually. And discipline shapes how you carry responsibility. Reflection, and you stop blaming circumstances and start correcting behavior. And ownership replaces excuses in your thinking. And that shift gives you real control over your life. Reflection, and control creates confidence in your decisions. And you trust yourself because you follow through. And following through builds credibility with yourself. Flexion, and self-respect grows from honored commitments. And discipline becomes a personal code you live by. And that code guides you even when no one is watching. And as discipline deepens, reflection, your purpose becomes clearer. And you understand why you started and where you are going. And distractions lose their power over your direction. And your actions align with long-term vision. Flexion, and vision keeps discipline meaningful during hard days. And hard days no longer feel pointless. And they feel necessary for growth. And purpose gives pain a reason. Reflection and reason keeps you moving forward. And forward motion becomes your new normal. And success begins to look different through disciplined eyes. And it is no longer loud or rushed. Flexion, and it becomes quiet, steady, and earned. And you value progress over praise, and praise fades, but progress compounds. And discipline keeps you humble when you win. Flexion, and it reminds you that work is never finished. And there is always another level to reach. And growth continues as long as discipline remains. Flexion, and remaining disciplined becomes a lifelong commitment. And in time, discipline turns potential into lived purpose. And you become someone who executes, not just imagines. Reflection, and your life reflects effort, not excuses. And people see results but miss the repetitions behind them. and you know the cost and accept it willingly. Reflection and discipline has shaped your habits and your mindset, and it has turned intention into action and action into identity. And you may not recognize who you used to be. Flexion. And because discipline has elevated your standards and your vision. And that transformation is the true reward of the work.